Yeah. It's a great honor to be here on this first Citizen Science for Health conference. And I would like to start with my personal fascination, because I'm in this field for more than 25 years and I still am very passionate about it. And I saw that on the stage as well, people who are very passionate about their field. And I share that passion. And this is one of the first experiences in my career. I take you back to the 90s when I was a PhD student. I worked in a mental hospital, and the assignment was to evaluate a rehabilitation program for psychiatric patients. Those programs are there to prepare people to participate in society. And I thought, well, I need to talk to the nurses, I need to talk to the psychiatrists and the therapists, but first of all, I need to talk to the patients. But then I got a warning by the therapists. They said, oh, be careful, they might become psychotic. So what they discouraged me, actually, to talk to the patients. So there I confronted external power of experts, and this has stayed for me forever. Who has the power to determine who can be involved in research? So this is an important question that keeps recurring in my work. Who has the power to determine who can be involved? Is it the professional, the therapist who can decide whether a patient can or should participate, or can we ask the people themselves? This is Elise Adriaanse. She was my first co-researcher. She has a spinal cord injury, and I got to know her in 2002 when I was asked to develop a methodology for health research agenda setting from the perspective of all stakeholders, including patients. This was at a time where many people were concerned about the fact that research programs and research priorities are set by funders and policymakers and not by end users. So they asked me to develop a methodology where I could engage end users as well. And I started working with the Spinal Cord Injury Association, and I asked them, is there somebody who I can team up with, because I don't know anything about spinal cord injury. And then I got to know Elise, and we were buddies for the whole project. And she introduced me to many fellow sufferers, and what I learned from them was that they had a lot of issues. They had issues related to health, many were overweight, many had bladder problems, many had decubitus, and they said, why didn't they anticipate? Why didn't they learn us to anticipate on these issues during the rehabilitation program? But they also said to me, you don't have this disease alone, you have it with your partner. And they lacked emotional support having to deal with such an injury. And then I spoke to the researchers, and guess what? They only had this little tiny, very, very, very specialized focus on mobility. And more in particular on the effectiveness of using a wheelchair. Elise said to me, well, those wheelchairs are never gonna fly. What's the point? So this is an experience where I really learned the uniqueness of the patient experience, and that there is a big discrepancy between what professionals might think is important and what patients think that is important. I would like to just go back to why are we doing this work? Because sometimes we forget why this is so important. And I think the most important argument for this is that we want science to have a meaningful impact. And if we want science to have a meaningful impact, we have to get out of our laboratories, and we have to take our hands off our ears to listen to what bothers people in practice. And a second argument is that a lot of people in our society feel that they don't have a voice, that they are not heard, that they are not seen, that they are underrepresented in research. And that may lead to polarization. So that's an ethical and a political argument to do this kind of work. Now, the third argument is more methodological, that currently in society we are confronted with many very complex, wicked problems. And we can't solve these problems alone. We need all the perspectives, all the knowledge, all the ideas, also of citizens, in order to understand these problems. There's a rich intellectual history where we can learn from. And one of the people who has been very important in developing participatory research is Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire lived in Colombia, and he was an educator. And he worked with poor farmers, and he wanted to train them, he wanted to educate them, but he felt that they were not very interested in what he taught them, until he started to listen to what they were really concerned about. So he said, you need to start where people are, and then they are very willing to be engaged and to be taught. And an important notion he also developed is that people cannot educate and empower themselves, nor can other people educate or empower them. It is the communal activity that empowers people. So people need the support of each other in order to be empowered. I want to show you a little example from my own work to give you a sense of what participatory health research looks like in practice. And this is a couple of women who I met in a nursing home. And they called themselves, after a couple of times meeting me, the taste buddies. These are women between the 70s and 90s. And my aim was to develop a way of working with them, engaging them in having a say, not on personal matters, but on collective matters going on in a nursing home. So I started talking to them, and a recurring issue were the meals. The meals were a pressing issue. Someone told me, oh, I've cried 2 weeks about the very bad meals. And someone said, I've gone to the client council, but they don't listen. And someone said, oh, I bake an egg every morning because the quality of the meals is so bad. So this was something they really bothered about. And they didn't know that from each other. So that was a really eye-opener, that they didn't know that all of them were concerned about the meals. So I asked them, well, if this is such an important issue for you, would you like to do some research on this issue to see whether we can improve something? They were skeptical. They said, we've talked to the manager, we've talked to the client council, nothing's going to change. But after a while, they really started to be interested in doing some research. So we said, well, let's see why the meals are so bad. So they started doing research. And they also talked to the kitchen personnel, they talked to the care staff, they talked to everyone to understand the problem. And when we had a grip on the problem, we sort of came into a sort of impasse because they didn't know how to improve the situation. And they were skeptical about the possibilities to improve the situation. So I asked them, do you want to go on? I didn't know how to proceed. And they said, yeah, we would like to try this. And so we started to dream. One of the ladies said, well, we have a kitchen actually in this nursing home. We don't use it, but why not open it again? And this really brought about a lot of energy and a lot of creativity. We also did photo voice with them, so we gave them cameras where they could picture what they really liked. So now we had not only done research into the problem, but we also had a sort of plan how we could improve the situation. And from dreaming, we went to dialogue. We started to talk to all the stakeholders in the nursing home, and eventually the kitchen was reopened. And the ladies were in the committee when they hired a cook. And we can see that this project really made a difference because the quality of life improved because the meals were better, the relationships improved because now for example, the care personnel was no longer thinking of the older people as complaining, but they saw that they could bring up solutions. The local manager was so impressed that every Friday he started a captain's lunch where people could just walk in to have a chat with him. And we saw empowerment among the women. They were very proud of what they had accomplished. And they were now a team. They had developed a friendship relation. And there were also other nursing homes in the surrounding who got interested. So they asked us, can you do this also in our nursing home? And then different subjects came up because every situation is very particular. So this is an example of what participatory action research looks like. Now, let me get to the theory. So what you see is that participatory action research is not about measuring, it's not about describing or explanation, it's about transformation. It's about transformation based on collective action. And collective action grows from a heightened personal understanding, more mutual understanding, and empowerment. Those are the basis for collective action, with social justice as the sort of moral horizon where you work to. So change is planned, is not a coincidence, but is something that you work to with the people in the field. It's not you who are doing the change, people themselves are making the change possible. And this is also about sharing control. And that's not easy. I remember in this project that it took me some time to accept the priority of the women. To accept that the meals would be the topic of the research. They decided, and I had to let go. So it's about making space for the priorities and the perspectives of other people in all the phases of the research, because they were also doing the data generation with us. And they were also engaged in the analysis and in the solutions. And this is sometimes called collaboration, but I really like the notion of Tina Cook, and she talks about co-laboring, because it's not always easy. collaboration sounds very smooth, but as I already showed you, there were impasses, there were conflicts, there were difficult situations. It's work. It requires an effort. So I like collaborating. And this is not about using the right techniques. Of course, you have to use methods, and you use the methods that maximize participation. But in essence, you have to create a communicative space, a space where people can share experiences and where they can dive into those experiences and inquire into them. So what does it mean to work with people who suffer from dementia if you search for epistemic justice? How do we relate to people who cannot express themselves verbally, or where there is not a direct connection between what people say and their intentions? That's something we have to figure out. How do we reach hard-to-reach groups? And are they hard to reach, or are we hard? Because we are very privileged in terms of our education, in terms of our whiteness, in terms of our economic position. And we often take that for granted. So if we work the way we do, we might not be able to connect to people. So perhaps we need to do something instead of them, the hard to reach, being fixed. And that also means that you have to have courage, that you have to experiment with creative methods. So I go on to talk about ethical principles. Because we have those ethical principles like confidentiality and anonymity and informed consent, but in participatory action research we have additional ethical principles like respect, equality and inclusion, collective action, mutual learning. So those are principles we care about in our research. And if we take those principles as guiding our work, we will also see that we have particular ethical issues in this kind of work. And Sarah Banks and Mary Bryden Miller have edited a book about the typical ethical dilemmas in this kind of research. A recurring ethical dilemma relates to how do we share power? Whom gets the credit? How do we work with deadlines? Do we then take the project to ourselves and leave people behind? How do we reimburse people? That's a sort of purple crocodile in the Netherlands. We don't talk about it, but we have this beautiful citizen science program at ZonMW, but citizens cannot be paid through that program. And yeah, how can they then be involved? And this is not only something what you have to do when you write a proposal and talk about the principles, how you're going to address informed consent. This is something that occurs on a daily basis. So these are everyday ethical dilemmas, small ethical issues that come up throughout the research process and that you have to address. So I really like the word ethics work as something that is infused in all what you do. And you cannot place that or address that in a proposal. This is something that comes up again and again. Often you don't have easy answers. These are typical the issues that keep you awake. So my conclusion is that there is an urgency for citizen science and participatory research, given the wicked problems of our society, given the underrepresentation of certain voices, given the fact that a lot of people don't feel they are heard and seen. So thank you very much.